Every year, 1.3 million people die in car crashes worldwide. But here's the shocking truth. You're 20 times more likely to survive a crash today than in 1960. Well, why is this? Because physicists and engineers turned collisions into a solvable equation. So let's unpack how they hacked the laws of physics to save millions, starting with this terrifying test. So in this test, we have a 2009 Malibu versus a Chevrolet Bel Air. And as you can see, the Chevrolet Bel Air gets absolutely decimated, and that passenger in there gets destroyed as well. If that's a real person in there, there's absolutely no way you're surviving that collision. As you can see, there's no seatbelts in there, no airbags, nothing. And so when this collision happens, two important concepts are happening. We have momentum and force. So let's take a closer look. The Chevy actually has a rigid frame, which turns the steering column into a sphere. All force goes straight to the driver. And for the 2009 car, though, however, it self-destructs on purpose. The hood crumples to extend the crash time while the cabin stays intact. So the hood crumpling, this is actually called a crumple zone, which is very important in modern times. Essentially, this is force equals change times change in momentum over change in time in action. Increase in change in time decreases the force, and the force plummets by a lot actually. Let's take a closer look with the graph. As you can see, when change in time is very small, the force is very high, and when change in time is very long, force is dramatically decreased. So, short change in time equals fatal force, and a long change in time is a survivable force, which is the effect of crumple zones. Let's take another look at this with me as an example. So that was about a 3 foot drop onto a 3 foot drop onto a soft blanket. So the soft blanket in this this situation is acting as our crumple zone. The egg is acting as a car, and so when the egg hits something, the or I'm sorry, yeah, in this analogy, it's going to be like that, and the egg is that distance as it's coming into contact with something is increased. So change in time would be, if it was tiny, it'd be like hitting the kitchen floor. So it would just go splat, it would crack everywhere. On a soft blanket, though, the change in time stretches as it lands, so it becomes safer, which is why we saw it not crack. Cars work essentially the same way, so let's calculate this for a real collision. We have an example problem here. And if we wanted to find their final velocities and their force if change in time was 0.2 seconds, this is how we'd do it. First, we'd set the SUV as the positive direction and the compact car as the negative. Then we can find their total momentum before collision. And from here, we can find the final velocities of both. And we can see that it's going to be in the positive direction, heading at 5 meters per second. And for the rest, we see that force is 60,000 newtons each way, which is correct. Force has to be the same exerted on each car. But the final velocity is actually determined because the mass of the SUV is more massive than the compact car, so it's going to have more momentum, leading to a positive 5 meters per second instead of a negative one. So this proves why size matters. Even with an equal force, the compact car's light mass means brutal acceleration. And so that's why small cars get wrecked when a small one hits a bigger car. So how do we go from this chaos to modern safety? Well, I want to take you guys back to the invention of the Benz patent wagon in 1885. As you can see, it is very bare bones. The main engine was on the back part of it. It was a four-stroke, single-cylinder type of engine, so an absolute monster. Don't want to deal with that. Capable of maxing out at a staggering 10 meters or miles per hour speed. So as you can see here, insanely quick. She can barely handle that thing. It's also not very safe, not sturdy at all. They almost flew out there with that little turn there. So not safe at all. So where did we go from this starting point? Well, it only took 70 years and two geniuses to improve upon this. On the left, we have the invention of crumple zones by Bella Barreny, and on the right, we have the invention of the seat belt by Niels Bohlin. And so these are two very important inventions among many others. But as we will see, um, force and momentum become very important, and that change in time is what engineers and physicists actually get to manipulate to make things safer. So on the left, the crumple zones, they are essentially the softer parts of the car, whereas the passenger cell in the middle is going to be the rigid part. We still need something rigid, to keep the passengers in place. However, the crumple zones play a crucial role because we need something to dissipate all that force, and so that crumple zone acts as that change in time. The longer the crumple zone, the more time it allows for that force acting on it to dissipate before it gets to the passenger cell, which is why we see that drastic decrease in force. Um, as for the seatbelt, same idea. He designed the 3-point seatbelt to stretch and increase change in time, which is a good thing. It also keeps you in place because if without the seatbelt, you would keep moving forward when the vehicle came to a halting stop, which is not a good thing. You'd be flying through the windshield. Not only that, it it would lessen the amount of force that you're having to deal with too, because it keeps you in the seat rather than into your dashboard, which would not be awesome. So together, these two inventions cut deaths by 50% in 20 years. So I got a couple scenarios for the seatbelt. We can calculate the force. It's always about force with these equations. So we see here that with no seatbelt, you're going to experience about 5.7 tons of force when you're only traveling at 34 miles per hour, which is a lot of force to be exerted on one person. You're probably not walking out of that alive in this case. But with a seatbelt, you're only experiencing 0.2 tons of force. Still some force there, but if we compare the two, that is going to be a drastic amount of force decreased, which is great. So that's actually about 5.7, or sorry, this is why seatbelts were cut. Fatalities were cut by 45%. So let's look at a crumple zone scenario. Same idea, except we're going to talk a little about distance too, because this is what matters. To find the average force for both cases, we can use the work energy theorem. So now we have force equals kinetic energy over distance. We have a force of 300,000. Sorry, we have kinetic energy of 300,000 joules and divided by our crumple zone, which is 0.7, it's going to give us 430,000 newtons of force. Without that, we're looking at a whopping 3 million newtons of force, coming straight at you without that rigid frame. There's nothing in the way of that. You're going to experience almost all of that force, and it's not going to look pretty. You're probably going to look like that person in the 1959 Chevy. So this is a reduction of force of about 7 times that, which is the difference between a totaled car and a totaled passenger. So from the Ben's deadly rigidity to today's engineered survival, we've transformed crashes from certain death to calculated safety with those crumple zones, seatbelts, and as you can see, airbags. But we didn't cover, but are essentially the same equations and are doing the same thing. It's increasing that change in time, which is very important. So remember, when you buckle up, you're wearing a physicist's masterpiece.